Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Surya Prakash Upadhyay from Indian Institute of Technology, Mandi. Today we are going to talk on module Ordinary Cities from the paper Sociology of Urban Transformations. So in this module titled Cities in the Word System, we explored how cities are becoming important locations in the word city network. We spoke about globalization and World City Research Network and their critique of global city concept. In passing, we also referred to Jennifer Robinson's idea of ordinary cities. So in this module, we will elaborate the idea of ordinary city. While approaching this ordinary city, we will introduce the critiques of global city research from a post-colonial and southern perspective. Later on in this module, we will also introduce the idea of ordinary cities, under which banner a plurality of research agenda have coalesced in cities of the global south. So beginning in the mid 1990s, attempts have been made to level the field for the study of cities across different contexts. The global cities from the developed world received prominent attention in exploration of cities, while global cities in the developed world have taken up most of the attention in the study of cities, and their urban experiences are effectively treated as a synodoc for urban experience generally. But the new theorizations have located themselves in the megacities of the third world or in smaller cities. So ordinary cities is not a framework that is shared by the diverse scholarship that has emerged in this context. Rather, it is a unifying conviction and a rallying point for a multiplicity of research agendas. So this module will guide you through the idea of an ordinary city, the need for such a concept, and we take some examples from the diverse literature it has engendered. What is the ordinary city? The specific concept of ordinariness originates in cultural studies with the work of Raymond Williams. Williams caused a shift in the discipline when he argued that understanding of culture cannot emerge merely from interpretation of high art and classic literature. Rather, it must comprehend larger structures of feeling that are articulated across high and popular culture. Culture is not a niche of creativity, but ordinary and articulated through a variety of media. In a similar manner, the concept of ordinariness applied to urban studies has attempted to effect a shift away from the overbearing analysis of particular extraordinary cities to produce theory on urbanization and urbanism. A paper by Ash Amin and Stephen Graham titled The Ordinary Cities first elaborated this position in urban studies. Their point of departure is a rediscovery of the city proclaimed by certain major strands of urban scholarship that highlights. While many commentators believed that advances in information and communication technology, that is ICTs, would create a global village and make urban agglomerations redundant. By the 1980s and 1990s, when Ordinary City was written, the persistence of urban agglomerations and in fact preponderance of the urban form has led to this rediscovery. Amin and Graham take on three particular strands of this literature pertaining to 1. Cities as nodes in a global network, 2. Cities as motors of national economies, and cities as hubs of creativity. They point out that in each strand, a particular set of activities and processes are privileged as key urban assets and projected as the markers of a city's significance in the world or global economy. Therefore, this projection is based on a relational understanding that takes only particular aspects of the urban, such as the presence of advanced producer services or the presence of particular kinds of professionals. Thus, the rediscovery and revalorization of cities is based on a remarkably narrow set of urban assets, which are valued highly in what can be called the hegemonic formation of global capitalism. Amin and Graham propose a different approach to urban assets. They remark that none of these perspectives actually take into account the city as a whole, and thus they actually misunderstand the way in which urban assets are created or assembled or procured. They call for a shift away from focusing on highly valued assets to appreciating and assimilating the multiplicity of urban spaces. The ordinariness of the city is not an illusion to being mundane, but to being fundamentally pluralistic. They call the ordinary city a multiplex. Let us take the example of Hyderabad. Hyderabad has emerged as a key metropolitan city in India, following what is called the IT boom. The state government of Andhra Pradesh, led by Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu, liberalized the state economy sufficiently to attract large multinational corporations set up shop in Hyderabad. Most of this investment and development took place in the outskirts of Hyderabad, which were christened Cyberabad. The IT companies were followed by pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, and banks. Around the facilities of these companies, large gated communities and commercial districts have emerged. These developments in Cyberabad have taken center stage in how Hyderabad is represented and understood. This projection ignores the centuries-long history of the rest of Hyderabad. It ignores the relationships between Cyberabad and the rest of the city and the region from which the infrastructural labor from the area is obtained. It avoids the complex ways in which resources and political will are mobilized in favor of Hyderabad, as opposed to the rest of the city. For a nuanced understanding of Hyderabad, one cannot begin and end at Cyberabad. While the city is a theatre of accumulation, capital accumulation is not the only game in town. Privileging capital accumulation or something like finance capital or other advanced producer services results in particular extraordinary cities. Privileging capital accumulation or something like finance capital or other advanced producer services results in particular extraordinary cities being replaced at the top of a discursively created hierarchies of cities as the keynotes on the map of the world. They are the word cities, while other cities stay off the map. The consequences of this discourse of word cities resonate in theory and policy, where findings and learnings from the extraordinary cities get transposed and transferred to other spaces, thus erasing differences and blinding theory to a larger world of urban experiences. So the specific concept of ordinariness, it originates in the cultural studies in the work of Raymond Williams, as I said before also. In fact, the ordinary city was first elaborated by Ash Amin and Stephen Graham in 1997. So the point of departure is the rediscovery of the city, and that was proclaimed by certain major strands of urban scholarship. The framework of ordinary city seeks to abandon the hierarchies and the label and to treat all cities as ordinary cities. While the city is a theatre of accumulation, but the capital accumulation is not the only game in the town. Privileging capital accumulation or something like finance capital or other advanced producer services results in particular extraordinary cities being placed at the top of a discursively created hierarchies of cities as the keynotes on the map of the world. They are the word cities, while the other cities stay off the map. So the consequence of this discourse of word cities resonate in theory and policy, where findings and learnings from the extraordinary cities get transposed and transferred to other spaces. Thus, it erases the differences and blinding theory to a larger world of experiences. So, where is this ordinary city located in between modernity and development? And part of this need arises from the peculiar history of urban studies. Cities have classically been seen as a modern form. Urbanization as a process has long been understood as concomitant to industrialization, that engine of modernization. Although this association has been unbundled famously by the pioneering spatial thinker Henri Lefebvre, the idea of cities as a modern form has persisted. Thus, in the history of urban studies, writings on Paris, London, and other New York and later New York dominate. These centers, often seen as being at the heart and also at the avant-garde of modernity, have established a privileged place in the canon of scholarship on cities. Until the mid 20th century, these cities were also the largest cities in the world. But in the aftermath of decolonization, third world cities have grown. Third world cities like Bombay, Shanghai, Jakarta grew larger than the old metropoles. However, this third world urbanization was not given the same credence. While the historical evolution of Paris is a textbook case of urbanization, the historical evolution of Bombay is unplanned, haphazard, and only given credence as a problematic. Jennifer Robinson brings out this point cogently in her book Ordinary Cities. She deconstructs the binary of modern cities and developing cities. While cities in the West are purported as modern and case studies of urbanization and urbanism, third world cities are problems that need developmental intervention. Thus, there is a remarkable power asymmetry in urban study itself. Some cities, viewed as properly modern, are the authentic articulations of urbanism, while the rest are a subaltern in this process. They do not fit into the meta-narrative of urbanization. They are somehow urbanization gone awry. Robinson calls for an abandonment of this binary and for a more cosmopolitan analysis of cities. On that averts the trope of historicism or parochialism unveiled as universalism. Two concepts in particular are useful to anchor an ordinary city's perspective, namely informality and subordinality. As Robinson points out, the third world city in urban studies was long represented and studied as a chaotic and unintegrated city. The southern megacities, bursting at the seams with little correspondence to master plans, largely received attention as objects of developmental intervention and not authentic urban experiences. However, powerful challenges emerged to this kind of representations. In its most extreme articulation, Mike Davis, in his book Planet of Slums, heralds a future where the slums and its forms will be the form of urban modernity. Similarly, several other scholars, such as the anthropologist James Holston and the geographer Ananya Roy, turned to informality not as an exception or aberration, but focused on it as a new norm in urban modernity. Understanding informality as an articulation of modernity brings us to the concept of subordinality. Modern cities and urban studies and discourse of urban planning heavily privilege the formal sector of cities. Part of this privilege has to do with the visible influence and international rationality of the formal sector. Part of it has to do with the availability of data. However, this privilege in a situation where the formal sector actually a tiny proportion of urban reality further renders the informal sector invisible and relegates its contribution to urban history to the margins. How to study the ordinary city? So far we have looked at two aspects of ordinary cities research. Firstly, it requires an epistemology that can deal with the multiplicity of cities. Secondly, it valorizes the subaltern urbanism that has largely been neglected in the history of urban studies. So, how does one grapple with multiplicity, and how does one tell a subaltern history without falling into the unusual trap of Eurocentrism? So, Robinson's cosmopolitanism is a solution, but it is an idealistic one that still locates itself off the map and sees relationally from nowhere in particular. To understand the city as a whole, we need a different kind of rationality, one that emerges from nowhere. Places are similar, but places are also constantly undergoing various forms of wordening. With an eye on these tendencies of places to be local and global simultaneously, one can find a different kind of relational approach, what Marin Gunty calls a worm's eye view, than a bird's eye view. A relational understanding that derives from a specification of very material interconnections and embodied practices. These are merely orientations. Tim Bunnell and Anand Maranganti argue that in the prevalent hierarchy of attention to cities which favors word cities, most students hailing from or interested in the cities which are off the map are simply unable to speak and articulate experience as a part of wider discourse on global urban reality. The ingenuity of ordinary cities research is that it becomes a rallying point for very diverse research agendas to find common ground and share insights from what would normally be valued as a similar case study. Let us illustrate our perspective using an example of Bholapur, a historic neighborhood in Hyderabad. Throughout the 20th century, it was a major node in the national and global leather industry. Its inhabitants, mostly poor Muslims and Dalit, employed therein. Throughout the uncertain history of the leather industry and through its eventual collapse, the neighborhood and its inhabitants have constantly reinvented themselves. With the diminishing value of the animal skins market, they turned to other kinds of scrap. Over a couple of decades, Bholapur became the central node in the city for waste recycling. This history of Bholapur is crucial to Hyderabad's development and waste infrastructure. It is a significant element in the history of leather trade in India and international competition in the leather market. Conventional perspectives would, at best, look at Bholapur as a scrap market and think of waste recycling. A less nuanced approach would simply consider it as a slum. In most cases, a neighborhood such as Bholapur would not even be on the map of urban studies. But thinking of Bholapur as an ordinary neighborhood in an ordinary city, the stories of the informal scrap markets carry insights about global processes and practices. Just one example being how the formal sector and informal sector are engaged in an unequal exchange. The informal sector absorbs and processes large amounts of waste produced by the formal sector and produces renewed commodities. It breathes value back into the waste and does so for very low returns. These renewed commodities or raw materials re-enter the formal circuit to be assembled into new commodities, which are exchanged for significantly higher returns. A study of Bholapur's scrap markets then opens up an interrogation into the same nature of relationship between the formal sector or capital and the informal sector or the slum. From the discussion we had in this module, we can see that ordinary city research has raised at least four charges against the global and world city research. One, that we have mistaken the part for the whole by focusing on a small set of cities let's say, not let's say, rather say London, Tokyo, and Paris, and we have determined them on a very narrow criteria. The claims that we have made of universalism of urban experience and urban culture, as articulated in the word cities, are actually very ethnocentric assertions. It occupies inordinate ordinate space in the discourse on cities. So because the flow of knowledge and policy recommendation from the word cities to other is very disturbing also. Lastly, we can say that the complicity in the neoliberal discourse of intercity competition and desires to move upward in the hierarchy has been one of the major challenges against which the Ordinary Cities program started. Richard Smith's counter criticism says that ordinary cities critics have confused the evidence of absence for the absence of evidence, meaning that they confuse the deliberate and strategic partiality of GAWC research to command and control functionality for a deliberate avoidance of other characteristics of cities. He argues that the purpose of GAWC research is quite specific to understanding economic specialization, and therefore changes of or favoritism towards western or northern cities are misplaced. He also denies that GAWC research has reinforced the neoliberal agenda to encourage competition between cities to vie for world city status. Another criticism of the ordinary cities research is that it props up GAWC research on as a straw man mistakenly attributed the aforementioned qualities, which allows ordinary cities researchers to polemically further on agendas, which is labeled as a conservative one to post-colonialize urban studies. In response to these criticisms, have argued that while the intentions and personal motivations of researchers or a collective of researchers might not identify with the charges raised against GAWC research as a part of the larger discursive formation and holding an influential position, the charges are significant and must be taken into stride. So, students, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. From the discussion that we had, one can see that ordinary city research has raised 4 charges against the globalization and world city research network. This is synodogy, parochialism, ethnocentrism, and occupying inordinate space in the discourse on cities. Responses to these charges were very quick and vociferous. Richard Smith's counter criticism labeled the majority of ordinary city literature, apart from Amin and Graham, as ignoratio elenchi, that is, they have missed the point. He says that ordinary cities critics have confused the evidence of absence for the absence of evidence, meaning that they confuse the deliberate and strategic partiality of globalization and world city research to command and control functionality for a deliberate avoidance of other characteristics of cities. He argues that the purpose of globalization and world city research is quite specific to understanding economic specialization, and therefore charges of ethnocentrism or favoritism towards western or northern cities are misplaced. He also denies that globalization and world city research has reinforced the neoliberal agenda to encourage competition between cities to vie for world city status. He also points out that the foundation of globalization and world cities perspectives in world system theory attests to its neo-Marxist thrust, which actually tries to call into question these very processes and also casts a strong doubt on the ability of the cities to move upward in the hierarchy. Another criticism of the ordinary cities research is that it props up globalization and world city research as a straw man, mistakenly attributed the aforementioned qualities. It is argued that the setting up and subsequent dismissal of this straw man allows ordinary cities research to polemically further an agenda, and which is labeled as a conservative one to post-colonialize urban studies. Responses to these criticisms have argued that while the intentions and personal motivations of researchers or a collective of researchers might not identify with the charges raised against globalization and world city research, because as a part of the larger discursive information and holding an influential position, the charges are significant and must be taken into stride. Thank you.